Excellent. Thank you. So, welcome everybody to today's edition of the Local Government Education Webinar Series, brought to you by University of Illinois Extension and Rural Partners, the voice of rural Illinois. My name is Mike Delaney, and I am an Extension Community and Economic Development Educator. I'm based up here in Ogle County in northwestern Illinois, and I'd like to begin with some quick housekeeping notes. First, please note that we will be recording today's webinar. At the conclusion of the presentation, registered participants will receive an email with slides from the webinar and a link to the recording. If you didn't register in advance but would like to receive the materials, that's great. Please just drop your email into the chat box and we'll make sure to add you to the distribution list for those materials. Please note that if you desire, you can activate Zoom's closed captioning function at the bottom of your screen. As always, you're welcome at any time to share your questions in the Zoom chat function. We will be having a Q&A at the conclusion of Dr. Redfield's comments, and we'll cover your questions at that point. Now, I'd like to introduce Ann Silvis, who serves as a member of the Board of Rural Partners. Ann?
Thanks, Mike. And this is, I guess, the first time I've been on the webinar since I retired from University of Illinois Extension. So instead of wearing two hats, I'm only wearing the Rural Partners board member hat today. But I still appreciate all that Extension does to partner with Rural Partners and plan and host these webinars. I'm really grateful to Dr. Redfield for joining us again to give us a lot of insight and background to Illinois political scene and what the recent election might mean for our state. So thanks, Mike, and thanks, Dr. Redfield, and thank you everyone for joining us today.
Terrific. Thanks, Ann. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing Dr. Kent Redfield, our speaker for today, Professor Emeritus of Political Science at the University of Illinois, Springfield. Dr. Redfield's affiliated with the University of Illinois Institute of Government and Public Affairs and the Center for State Policy and Leadership at University of Illinois, Springfield. He joined UIS in 1979, where his teaching and research focused on Illinois politics and state and local government. He's been engaged in research on the financing of political campaigns in Illinois and political ethics since 1991. Finally, he's a co-author of a new edition of Illinois Politics, A Citizen's Guide to Power, Politics, and Government, which was published by the University of Illinois Press in August of 2024. So, Dr. Redfield, the microphone's yours.
Thank you. We're going to have put up a couple of documents here that I'm going to reference in terms of talking about Illinois politics and about the recent election. I should also note that I came to Illinois to actually to work for the Illinois General Assembly and spent about 4+ years staffing the local government committees for the House Democratic staff back 1975 to 1979. So that was kind of my postdoc in terms of my education in politics. So what we're going to talk about is the nature and the structure, if you will, of Illinois politics as a foundation for talking about what happened nationally in the recent election and what that means for Illinois. So the first thing is that Illinois politics has a regional structure, and that's a useful way to think about it. When I came here, we were just moving from thinking about Illinois politics as Chicago versus downstate. Then as the suburbs became a separate both economic and political entity in Illinois politics, we went from what we'll characterize as a 2-ring circus to a 3-ring circus. But at that time, it was Chicago versus the suburban 5.5, which was suburban Cook County and then the surrounding collar counties, and then again downstate. And during that era, which was 1972 to 2002, roughly, downstate was really the competitive arena in which elections were won or lost, particularly in terms of statewide elections. And so, Dan Walker became governor of Illinois by winning downstate voters in both the primary and the general, and to become the Democratic candidate. And then he became an ex-governor when Jim Thompson won the office because he lost support in downstate Illinois. And so, that was the kind of framework until we got to the late 2002. Now, things were changing during all of that time. When Jim Edgar won the governor's race in 1990, he easily carried Cook County, suburban Cook County. 2 elections later, suburban Cook County had flipped to become a Democratic, strong Democratic region, and now we're in an era where Chicago and suburban Cook are solidly Democratic. Downstate is again as solidly Republican, and it is really the suburbs where those contests, statewide contests are decided. If you scroll down a little bit in the document, you will see that the regional share of the vote has changed dramatically. That between 1990 and 2022, the collar counties gained about 9% of the vote, and all of the other regions lost in terms of a percentage of the vote. Where if you look at the partisan side of that, then the partisan preference, then while Chicago, suburban Cook, and the collar counties all became more Democratic, downstate became more Republican. But what had happened was that while Chicago and suburban Cook became more Democratic and downstate became more Republican, Chicago and suburban Cook were much more intensely Democratic and then downstate. And the collar counties then became, the competitive region where we had, if you look at what's table number 2 there, a 16% swing from Republican to Democrat in terms of the collar counties during that period of time. The other thing about voting behavior involves primaries. And so what happens you have to get to a general election through the primary. And what has happened is that the primaries for statewide office on the Republican side have shifted dramatically towards downstate, providing a majority of the vote in statewide Republican primaries. And whereas the shift on the Democratic side has been into the suburban part of the vote. That has implications for the kind of candidates that win nominations in primary election. If we roll down to the next, the next point there, having to do, there's a couple of narratives that we need to talk about. The nature of politics has changed, nationally, but dramatically within Illinois we've gone from a party-centered kind of process to one that is much more candidate-centered, as the old parties have become weaker and weaker. And now we have a situation where you have candidates recruit themselves, fund their own elections, build their own coalitions. That's a significant change. Dan Walker, when he did that, was an aberration. Now that is normal in terms of Illinois politics. And Illinois is mirroring what's happened nationally. We came to it a little more slowly in terms of shifting towards this candidate-centered rather than party-centered elections. The other thing that has happened in terms of shaping Illinois politics is that the Democrats have controlled the drawing of congressional and legislative maps for the last 3 decades. And that has created a huge partisan advantage for the Democrats in terms of winning statewide office. Statewide, all things being equal, Illinois is a 54-46 kind of a state, depending on the candidates. But if you look at congressional elections, the Democrats hold 83% of the congressional seats, 14-3. In terms of legislative elections, the Democrats hold advantages of 66% in the House and 68% in the Senate, way above what you would need for a super majority. And so this is something that the Supreme Court has wrestled with and is now essentially punted and said, that it is not unconstitutional to draw maps that create a partisan advantage. And so the Democrats, in drawing the maps, have taken what is an advantage in terms of the demographics and voting behavior and strengthened that advantage tremendously through the way that we, in terms of shaping the districts that people get elected from. Okay, so we've got those factors that are shaping Illinois politics. The next factor has to do with the financing of politics. And so we're going to shift down and look at some tables that have to do with how we fund elections. What's happened here is that as parties have weakened, then candidates can no longer depend on the party delivering the vote. Old style party politics is, get the message to the faithful, get the faithful to the polls. And so good primary weather in Illinois in March was a rainy or snowy, day. And because the party people knew they were going to get their core supporters to the polls, and bad weather eliminated, the sometimes voters and the independents would be much less likely to show up. Now you have to get your voters to the polls. You've got to get your message out there. That requires money. And so money has become a much more dramatic part of understanding Illinois politics. And we've gone through three kind of significant events in terms of how that has played out into the current state of Illinois politics. First, we have just finished, I think, the billionaire era in Illinois politics, starting with Ken Griffin, starting with Bruce Rauner self-funding his own race in 2014, and then being aided by Ken Griffin, who, until he moved, was the richest man in Illinois, and Richard Hewlin, two very wealthy, one a hedge fund manager, the other a person involved with transportation, packaging kinds of interests. And so the combination of those three individuals not only fueled Rauner's election in 2014, but a resurgence in the Republicans in the legislature and ultimately in congressional races in 2016 because of the tremendous amount of money that they were putting into Illinois politics. When J.B. Pritzker ran for office in 2018, then he became the fourth part of this. And as you can see from the chart there, the billionaire era chart, the four of them through the end of this current election cycle spent more than $787 billion, $787 million of their own personal fortunes on Illinois politics. Now, the billionaire war is over, and Pritzker won. I don't think there's any doubt about that. Griffin has left the state. Ulen has stopped engaging in Illinois politics. Now, there are two things we want to quickly hit on, and then one more thing involving money. The mix of where the money comes from, at where you go absent my billionaire versus your billionaire, we've had a huge shift where the Republican funding base has collapsed in terms of Illinois politics. Historically, look at the chart from 1999, 2000, you've got the medical society, hospitals, beer distributors, manufacturers, two big utilities, cable companies, realtors. There are a lot of business entities there. If you look at 2022, which was the gubernatorial election, the top five contributors to Illinois politics are trade unions, headed up by the operating engineers. The next two are teacher unions. And then the eighth one on that list is the Illinois trial lawyers, which is a strong supporter of the Democratic Party. You have to get down to the realtors in terms of a business entity that historically leans Republican. So it is, again, the funding base of the Republican Party has really collapsed, whereas, and that became evident when we stopped having the billionaire money coming into the politics. Then if you look at the next table there, the Democrats have a fundraising advantage when you compare just money going to Democrats versus money going to Republicans, that not only is union money, if you roll that up a little bit there, you can see it, not only has union money, which we expect goes to Democrats, but the Democrats now get a majority of the
down. Whoever's controlling the slides.
Whoops. Oh, sorry about that. Yeah. So there we go. So the important point of this is business and professional money now goes primarily to Democrats because the Republican side of that is weaker. Plus the fact there are lots of people that put money into politics that just basically care about giving money to people in power and incumbents. And if you've got more incumbents, you control the chambers, then people give you money, and they give you more money than people in the minority. So the role of money in Illinois politics currently is a big advantage to the Democratic Party. And the last point we'll make quickly before we go to the next document is Illinois politics has become increasingly more progressive in terms of things that we have, in terms of legislation that we pass. And I won't go through the whole laundry list there, but that's a very long list of things. It used to be, well, Illinois is a blue state, but we're really not California or Massachusetts. And certainly there are people that would argue that that is no longer the truth, that we really are kind of this progressive entity sitting in the middle of the center of the country. Okay, so again, those are the things that have kind of shaped where we currently are in Illinois, in the nature of Illinois politics. That it is regional. It is you have to win elections by putting forth candidates that will appeal to suburban voters, but you have to get those candidates through the primary. And again, in the 2022 election, the Republican candidate, who had huge funding from Ken Griffin, who most fit that kind of how do Republicans win elections in Illinois kind of profile, those that person, Richard Austin, ran third in the Republican primary for governor. So this is a dilemma for Republicans in terms of how do they get the candidates and the financing they need to compete with the advantages that the Democrats have, and protect not just money and voting behavior and demographics, but also against this, the tremendous advantage from redistricting. Okay, so now we can stop, or we can go back to at some point to run over those points again. But what I want to do next is look at what happened in the recent election, and talk about that again. 15 minutes less, 20 minutes, and so we can go to questions. And so we now have most of the numbers, and with reasonable, they're complete and accurate as far as what happened in the election. And so if you look at the national election, this was a very close election. It's going to be about 1.5% in terms of the margin. Now that's 2.3 million votes, but that is a very, very small margin. It is one of the closest margins in the last 100 years. Now, again, winning the popular vote is not everything, because the 1.5 margin that President-elect Trump won by is a smaller margin than his margin 4 years ago, when he actually lost the electoral the popular vote by about 2.5%, and of course President Bush only beat Kerry by about 0.5% in terms of his margin. So it is about the Electoral College ultimately, but if you go down a little bit deeper, then the concern for the Democrats was that their vote total was down about 6.5 million votes, comparing Biden's totals in 2020 to Harris's total in 2020 in 2024, that's an 8% drop, whereas President-elect Trump gained about 3 million votes from 4 years ago, and that's about a 4% increase. And so while voting overall went down, the concern for the Democrats was that they lost about 8% of the total that they had 4 years earlier. And now that we'll deal with that as we go down a little bit further in this chart, because where the action really is in the battleground states, and there are 7 of them, and this is where the last 3 elections have been determined. President Trump in 2016 won 6 of the 7 battleground states. Biden won 6 of the 7. Trump in this election, President-elect Trump won 6 of the 7. And so this is where the action really takes place, is in these battleground states. Okay, I think, yeah. And so, yeah, this is, so there's some, quickly we need to deal with, was this a landslide? Is there a mandate? And again, by any historical measure, this is not a landslide election. We're talking about the Johnson election in 64, the Nixon election in 72, the Reagan election in 84. These were elections where the president-elect got close to or more than 60% of the vote, and between 480 and 525 of the available 438 electoral votes. So, this is not a mandate, a landslide. Those are really words that are used, to kind of augment or to hype the fact that someone won the election and therefore should be in a position to enact whatever their program was that they were running on. The reality is that if you win by 0.5% or 20%, or you win the electoral college by a couple of dozen votes, or get all of the states except one, you still get to be president either way, whether it's close or not. The reality is, how can you, the important question is, how do you use that? Now, in terms of the implications of this election, then, clearly from the exit polls, we see that, the voters that were Trump voters were, concerned about inflation, economy, immigration, and a judgment on the Biden administration. People were not pleased with the direction of the country, with how things were going with their lives. And, that translated when you push them into inflation, economy, immigration. But, and so if you're doing the post-mortem for the Democrats, then, why didn't our message speak to those sorts of things? When you get beyond exit polls, and again, we need to be very careful about exit polls. Polling is, based on mathematics, sampling, probability distributions, and it is totally dependent on the quality of the questions, the kind of sample that you get in terms and people telling you the truth. And then polling is plus or minus 3%, 95% of the time, which means that if you've got your best numbers sitting there, it could be 3 points either way. And if you run 100 polls, 5 of them are going to be bad polls. They're going to be outside what turns out to have been kind of the sweet spot in terms of polling can give you. And exit polls are even worse. But in terms of what we're talking about, then where people are really focusing is that we had a shift away from the Democrats towards the Republicans. But again, we're projecting here. We're not saying a shift away from Harris to Trump. We're using Harris and Trump as stand-ins for assumptions we're making about that this is the electorate, and the electorate in terms of the Latino vote, particularly Latino men, shifted towards the Republicans. That Democrats, were stronger in voters with college degrees, but lost ground in voters without college degrees. Younger voters and voters that were both lower and middle income shifted more towards Trump than Harris, or, if you will, more towards the Republicans and away from the Democrats. Those are troubling statistics. If you're a Democrat, you want to take advantage. If you're a Republican, if you're a Republican, you want to take advantage. If you're a Democrat, then you want to say, why were we doing better and now worse among a particular demographic? And you will see things that are very global, too progressive, too conservative, not speaking to blue collar, working people, or it can be, very micro sort of, well, this has to do with, men in general, or Latino men in general, in terms of some analysis of culture. And, you're thinking about, how do we craft a campaign? How do we put money and message in ways that allow us to do better in the next election? Unfortunately, what you're dealing with here is a situation where, one of the kind of axioms of politics is in any campaign, 50% of the money you spend is wasted, but nobody knows which half. And so it is, it is very difficult, to parse these things out in ways that, you can make sense out of. We know, for instance, if we're looking at the Senate here, that the Republicans won control of the Senate. They picked up 4 seats, 2 seats that were held by Democrats that we knew were going to go, Montana and West Virginia, and then 2 seats in swing states that are 1 swing state, 1 non-swing state that had previously, Ohio and Pennsylvania, went from a Democratic incumbent to a Republican. So we're trying to figure out, but in 3 other states, we had Democratic incumbents who won in spite of the fact that in those swing states flipped from Democrat to Republican from 4 years ago. So, parsing elections is difficult. Now, in terms of what, having control of the Senate is great if you only need 50%. But in the current Senate rules, you need 60% on most, regular bills, substantive legislation. On a lot of appropriation bills, you need, you don't need just 50%. You need 60%. You need to be able to, get over past a filibuster. It's only when you get to budget reconciliation bills that you're in situations where you can make serious both economic budget kinds of changes, but also substantive policy changes by a simple majority. So it's there are difficulties. It's good to control the Senate. It is not the same as controlling the Illinois Senate in terms of having a majority. In the House of Representatives, the final results, subject to recounts, is the Democrats now have, the Republicans now have essentially a 3-vote majority. The Democrats picked up 2 seats from the previous Congress. What we mean by that is a majority is 218. So if you've got 220 members, you lose 2 votes. 2 members take a walk on you on a partisan roll call. You're down to 2018. You're still in business. 3 members take a walk, and you're down to 2017, and you no longer have a majority. And so this is the second narrowest congressional majority since the Democrats had a 2-vote majority in 1917. So this means that if you thought Congress was messy and chaotic during the last 2 to 4 years, it's likely to be even more so, even though the Republicans have the trifecta of the presidency, the House and the Senate. Okay, now we take a few minutes to talk briefly about Illinois. The same phenomena in terms of looking at the presidential election you saw at the national election. The Democratic vote went from 17% to 11% victory for the Democrat. That means that there were 400,000 votes that that Biden got that Harris did not get. But President-elect Trump ended up either losing or gaining, depending on your most current count, 2,000 votes. He got exactly the same number of votes. The reality of that is that it is still very difficult to win a statewide election in Illinois if you are a Republican candidate. Then if we look at what went on in terms of the legislative side of that, if we scroll down to that, we are going to see that the Democrats picked up, there was absolutely no change in the General Assembly. And so, the same number, that absolutely no change, 78 majority, 78 to 40 in the House between 2002 and 2022 and 2024, and in the Senate, the Democrats actually lost a seat. What that tells me is that you have wrung just about all of the partisan advantage out of the drawing maps that you can in Illinois. You can't draw maps that are going to magically produce more than the 78 seats you got in the House, 40 seats in the Senate. That's about it, without having some huge changes in terms of the electorate or the demographic. The congressional delegation, which is, we can scroll down past this. Yeah, right. The congressional delegation shows the magic of gerrymandering, because we went from having in 2020 13 Democrats and 5 Republicans. When the Democrats drew the map, they made essentially 3 Republican seats disappear. They took Kensinger's seat that stretched around the suburbs and downstate Illinois and made it, just threw it out of existence because they had to lower the number of seats from 18 to 17. And then they drew 2 Democratic districts, one based in Rockford, another Democrat in the Quad Cities and Peoria, Bloomington, Normal, and then another district based in Champaign through Springfield down to the Metro East to elect 2 Democrats. And then whatever was left over became the 3 districts that are now represented by downstate Republicans and comprise the whole of the Republican delegation in Congress. Those are terrible districts in terms of what was left for the Republicans. Okay, so I'm running over my time here. So what is going on nationally is not likely to cause big changes in Illinois politics over the next 6 years, the next 3 elections, until you get a new map and until you get, particularly if Pritzker were to decide not to run for re-election, then you might get a shakeup in terms of the basic dynamics. But the bottom line is there, this is not a hopeless situation for Republicans. We're only in the state of Illinois. We're only a decade past Bruce Rauner being elected governor and the Republicans making significant gains in the General Assembly. But you're going to have to rebuild the Republican Party. You're going to have to be able to take advantage of some of the things that were happening nationally in terms of rebuilding the party. You're probably going to have to get a new map in terms of the congressional and the legislative. But and let me stop there because I've run over into the question time. But the reality of Illinois politics makes it difficult in the current environment to be successful in terms of the Republican Party in legislative, congressional elections or statewide elections. That is not destiny by any stretch of the imagination. On the other hand, you would much rather be in the Democrats' position than the Republicans' position, particularly coming out of an election where nationally, and you'd rather be in, an Illinois Democrat than an Illinois Republican, particularly coming out of an election where the national Republicans, did poorly in the presidential election and in Senate elections, although and marginally improved their position within the House. And at that point, we can go to questions and reactions. I am more than happy to talk about anything. On the top of those 2 documents, there was my cell phone number and my email address. I'm more than happy to respond to phone calls and questions about any of the material that we've just talked about or Illinois politics in general. I really have been retired since 2008 and haven't been teaching since 2015, but everybody got to have a hobby, and Illinois politics is mine. So I'm more than happy to respond to questions and emails about any of this. And with that,
well, Dr. Redfield, thank you so much. I certainly can hear from the passion and the level of your knowledge that you would welcome any opportunity to spend more time chatting about the implications of these things. We do have a couple questions. One we'll start out with from Caroline. Maybe you could venture to offer some thoughts about how the shifts in candidate and party-driven politics in Illinois at the state level might also relate to local elections, which are usually nonpartisan.
Well, nonpartisan is, we have nonpartisan elections in Springfield, which we used to jokingly refer to. Sometimes they fought, and other times we just had Republicrats, which were, the governing coalition of the movers and shakers. But as parties have weakened, then you have more dependence at the local level on self-funding or interest groups having more input, groups that have organization and membership, like labor unions, again, can contribute to campaigns in ways that political parties traditionally contributed to campaigns. The party function is to recruit candidates, fund elections, get out the vote, organize government. I mean, that's at any level. And as you lose the party function or the elite governing kind of function, and then it becomes more fragmented. It can be more chaotic, but it also creates opportunities to engage and to build coalitions and for groups to have an impact, particularly with, again, the death of patronage means that you're not leveraging that in terms of why people get involved with politics or don't get involved with politics. So it is not as simple as it used to be, but I think it's more democratic, and there are many more opportunities to be able to have an impact and to engage, as opposed to the old style was, the famous quote was from the Democrat Abmitka, famous judge, congressman, wanting to get involved with Chicago politics, went to the ward, said, I want to volunteer. They said, who sent you? He said, nobody sent you. Nobody sent me. I'm here. I want to get engaged. And the response was, we don't want nobody sent. Who's your patron? Who are you representing in terms of wanting to come in and play in our game and stuff? So that era, for I think for better, is gone, and the opportunities are there, but it's not as simple as it used to be.
Interesting. So with the death of patronage, I guess the fundamental point is that does open up opportunities for folks who are energized, interested, and willing to invest their time in public service.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, does this also mean that we can get, we get more ideology and more kind of group identity sorts of things? Absolutely. I mean, there's no, nothing is all, there are pluses and minuses to everything. But again, it's much more of an open and an open process for people to participate in.
Got some questions flowing in. Donna points out that many countries have laws dictating how long campaign periods can be, and limiting basically the length of campaigns. The U.S. doesn't. Candidates who must advertise for a year or more require significant campaign funds, exhaust voters, and importantly, spend an inordinate amount of time fundraising instead of policymaking. Do you think a bill shortening the election season is ever possible?
Okay, I am wholeheartedly in support of all of the sentiments expressed in terms of where that question came from, and I don't know anybody that didn't breathe a sigh of relief when we finally got to election day earlier in the month. On the other hand, the people that are running for office and the people that hold office want to maximize their opportunity. And so that is not something that you are going to be able to sell to the U.S. Congress or the the Illinois General Assembly. But where you have citizens initiative, that allows you to enter into those kinds of laws. And we've had, we're limited in Illinois. It's really structure and process of the legislature. It's not the elections. So that is a barrier to that, is the fact that you're asking politicians to limit their ability to use their resources. If I've got unlimited money, then I want to be able to spend it as much as I can, as long as I can. And I want to find ways to get my name out there. The other, frankly, and again, this is my area that I've spent a long period of time in, this, starting with Buckley versus Vallejo back in the 70s, and then right up to the current day, this is a Supreme Court that is, I think, overly siding with free speech as it relates to running and participating in elections. And they are very suspicious of anything that would impinge on citizens and candidates as citizens to engage in politics. So you might have, you can't stop people from running an ad. You can shorten the length of time that they can be an official candidate, and therefore shorten the time in which they can take advantages that the elections law gives them. But it is just, you're going to come up against some resistance on the part of the Supreme Court of anything that someone would claim is somehow limiting your ability to exercise your free speech rights, both in terms of running for office or spending money to support somebody running for office.
The court of last resort, as always. I'm going to interject here for a moment with a couple things. First off, we've just put up a quick poll. If you wouldn't mind taking a second to drop in a response, that just helps us evaluate the programming, and we keep track of those and use those as measures to help improve the programming and the topics that we're selecting. Also want to take a quick moment to put in a plug. We'd mentioned during the intro, Dr. Redfield is a co-author of a new book, Illinois Politics, A Citizen's Guide to Power, Politics, and Government. Nancy has helpfully dropped in the note into the chat that not only was it published by University of Illinois Press in August, but if you're interested in getting the book, you can use the U of I offer code for 30% off. So check that out if you are also a fan of politics and like not only to attend webinars, but also read about it. Continuing on with some of the questions, excuse me, that were posed, drop back to one that, and I'll kind of generalize this one, Dr. Redfield.
Sure.
Do you think that some of the issues that were influencing voters' minds during the course of this recent national election have the same sway here in Illinois?
Okay, in terms of appealing to on economic issues and tax issues, absolutely. And so
Right.
you're going to see a tax revolt and a real mess in the city of Chicago having to do with, is government too big? Does it waste money? Is it really addressing our needs? That gets muted when you bring those issues to the General Assembly. But that we are in the middle. We are starting what is probably the toughest budget year since we got through with the Rauner years. in terms of not having a budget for 2 years. And we are going to have to take, either find more revenue or make serious cuts in what the state is spending money on. And the governor just announced the head of his new state agency involving early childhood education. So the opportunities for people, I think the Republicans in the legislature will lead the charge, but you're going to find sympathy on the part of Democratic members in more swing districts, more suburban districts, to the idea that we ought to be, government ought to be smarter, it ought to be more focused, it ought to be more efficient. And if you want more money from the citizens of Illinois, I think you first have to prove that you can run the state efficiently and effectively and solve problems. Democrats don't control the state of Illinois because they've solved every problem that the state has. There are a number of factors that have combined to put them in a dominant position, but that also means they own everything in terms of whether we do or don't address those issues. And so I think on economic issues, tax burden, those kinds of questions, being more friendly economically, business friendly, I think there's going to be a lot of wanting to be able to do things that show you're in touch with some of the messages people think they heard from the national election. And so I think that's, the environment is going to force some introspection and some, amongst the people that are currently running the state. I don't think there's any question about that. And that creates opportunities.
Following up on the issue of the length of the campaigns, I'll just note that Caroline noted that at least at the local level, there are campaign processes are perhaps not as long. There are perhaps some limits campaigning for the chair of a village board, for example, that might limit the campaign terms to about a couple months. A question here posed, but I think it probably goes a little granular for you, goes down to the county level. Confusing. It's been confusing to me how a DuPage County can be Democrat, what factors went on there. But as I say, I suspect that's a little granular for.
Well, actually, no, because one of the co-authors teaches at the College of DuPage, and so for someone who's knows more about downstate and Chicago, she was essential to us writing a book. And so what's happened, you've got the demographic change, which meant lots of in-migration from 1990 to 2010, where you had more Hispanics, more Asians, lost a stagnant African-American population, lost a lot of whites citizens during that time. Then the Republican Party became more more downstate dominated and more socially conservative. So abortion, gay rights, some of those issues, created, more progressive areas. And I mean that descriptively, not as I'm not saying that good, bad, or different, just, more. So the suburbs have become more progressive and more diverse. The Democrats have also, again, taking advantage of their organizational and their financial resources, have done a much better job of organizing at the township level as well as the county level. And so that has resulted in, Lake, DuPage, and Will, and I think Kane now all have Democratic majorities on the county board. On the other hand, Trump's best performance and Harris's worst performance, it was in Will County. The Harris still carried Will County, but there's a lot, if I were trying to say, where do I want to, kind of build back on the Republicans and fight back, and I had limited resources. If we're going to be strategic, then I would be giving, I'd be focusing on Will. I mean, what Pritzker did when he was running for governor was dump a lot of money into suburban Democratic county and township organizations. And so it's the building block of local government. And now the Democrats are, the local government as the building blocks for county presence. And the Democrats just, got a majority of the county board in McLean County, downstate, Bloomington Normal. So, this is not just, this is chiseled in stone sort of stuff. And so now the Republicans have to respond to the fact that, that the Democratic Party is real in those suburban areas. And, and how do we, why are they now, what are the issues? What are the things that we're losing ground? How do we fight back? How do we build? And so this is a dynamic situation. And again, McLean County would indicate that it's, not hopeless to be, a Republican county downstate if you're a Democrat. Similarly, if the Republicans are going to be competitive statewide, then the targets of opportunity are going to be in those suburban areas that have most recently become, more Democratic friendly, or in fact have become Republican, have become Democrats. So I think you see the play of these patterns of organization and money and demographics and issues, and so, you can't, again, I'm just trying to be as analytical, and so I'm not disparaging, but, you can't carry the suburbs by nominating people like Darren Bailey to run for governor, because that just raises too many problems with what is a growing kind of progressive core of voters within those areas. And so that's a dilemma. But the Democrats, can get out over their skis and end up with candidates and positions that go too far, because they think, well, there's no way we can possibly, lose this situation. And that's, so I think that's, it's not surprising that, this is the battleground right now, is the suburbs.
Thank you for that observation, that final observation. We have reached the end of our time together. And on behalf of Rural Partners and University of Illinois Extension, I want to thank you, Dr. Redfield, for your presentation today. To everybody in the audience, if you're not already receiving our email notices, as I mentioned before, about the upcoming webinar offerings, please drop your email into the chat before you go, and we'll add you to our email list. Please note that the local government education webinar series will be taking a brief hiatus for the holidays, but we're going to resume programming in January with a new series on education, beginning over the noon hour on Thursday, January 9th. We'll also be continuing our long-standing early year offerings, the annual presentations of a state legislative update on Friday, January 31st at noon, and a federal legislative update just a few days later the following week. Our webinar team also, in conjunction with the Office of Broadband, is offering a webinar tomorrow at noon for those of you high-speed internet aficionados on Illinois' broadband map resource update. Finally, I'd always like to remind folks to visit our website at go.illinois.edu/LGE, not only to register for upcoming programs, but also to access our video archives of prior presentations on a wide variety of community development topics. So with that, thank you all for attending today's webinar. Have a great day, have great holidays, and we hope to see you back for future presentations. Thanks very much.